Think about maybe your breakfast this morning or that quick lunch you grabbed.
Hmm.
Was it like a slice of bacon, maybe some sausage, or deli meat in a sandwich?
Yeah, happens a lot.
Exactly. Processed meat is just incredibly common in our daily lives, right?
Right.
A real staple for so many people. But, have you ever stopped to think just how enormous this market truly is? Not just here, but like globally.
Oh, it's not just big. It's a rapidly expanding universe, really. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay.
The global processed meat market. We're going to look at its current size, see how much it's projected to grow
Right.
in the next few years, and importantly, explore the fascinating trends and drivers behind all this expansion worldwide.
And just so everyone knows, all our insights for this deep dive, they come straight from some pretty detailed market research by cognitive market research.
That's right.
So our mission here isn't just to, list off big numbers. We want to pick out the key trends, understand where the really strong growth is happening geographically, and really dig into what all this means for you as a consumer, maybe, or just someone watching these global economic patterns shift.
Okay, so let's set the stage, the really big picture first. The global processed meat market brought in revenue of over $265 billion back in 2021.
Wow. Okay, 265 billion. Let's unpack that for a second. A market generating hundreds of billions. I mean, that is a staggering amount of pepperoni, hot dogs, cured meats, just everything.
It really is.
And it's not just a snapshot in time, is it? The projections show even more growth coming.
Oh, far from it. That market value, it's projected to climb to nearly $320 billion by 2025.
Okay.
And then, get this, a really substantial number, over $462 billion by 2033.
Whoa.
So this consistent expansion, it's reflected in what we call the Global Compound Annual Growth Rate, or CAGR. That's sitting at 4.73%.
Okay, so CAGR, for anyone not familiar, that's basically the average growth each year over that period.
Exactly, smooths out the bumps. So this 4.73% tells us it isn't just a blip. We're looking at steady upward growth of almost 5% every single year.
That's incredible sustained growth. So if we're looking across the globe, where is this growth really accelerating? Because I can't imagine it's the same everywhere.
No, you're right. It definitely varies. Let's start with what's projected to be the fastest growth engine. That's the Asia-Pacific region, or APAC.
Okay, APAC, and this is where the story gets really compelling, I think.
It is.
APAC is showing the highest projected KGR globally, right? Nearly 6%. That's a pretty big jump compared to that global average we just talked about.
It truly is significant. So back in 2021, APAC's market value was around $52 billion.
Right.
But it's projected to more than double, surging to over $104 billion by 2033.
Doubling. Wow.
Yeah. But, beyond just the numbers, what's really fascinating here is why. Why is this region seeing such explosive growth?
Good question.
Well, the research points to a few key things. Rapid urbanization is one. A burgeoning middle class with more disposable income.
Makes sense.
And just a growing demand for convenient, ready-to-eat foods that kind of fit these modern, busy lifestyles.
Yeah.
Plus, you've got investment in better cold chain logistics, refrigeration and transport and modern processing facilities. That's crucial, too, making these products more accessible.
So it's like a perfect storm of lifestyle shifts and infrastructure improvements catching up.
Exactly.
Okay, so within APAC, which specific countries are really pushing this growth?
Well, China is a massive player. Just in terms of sheer market value, it was leading the region with over $19 billion in 2021. $19 billion. And projected to reach nearly $42 billion by 2033. That's a strong CAGR, too, about 6.7%.
Huge.
Japan also had a pretty substantial market, nearly $11 billion in 2021. And South Korea was around $6.5 billion that same year.
But I'm looking at the numbers here. There's one country that really jumps out in terms of the rate of growth, isn't there?
You spotted it. Absolutely. India. India has the highest country-level CAGR across the entire report, an impressive 7.66%.
Wow, over 7.5% per year.
Yeah. Its market is set to grow from just under $6 billion in 2021 to almost $14 billion by 2033. It really highlights this dynamic shift as, consumption patterns are evolving rapidly in India.
Interesting.
And it's not just the giants. The category labeled Rest of APAC also shows really robust growth, around 7.16% CAGR. So that indicates broad regional expansion, likely fueled by similar factors.
Okay, so if APAC is the kind of the future growth story, the fastest engine, who's currently let's say, the reigning heavyweight champion, in terms of just pure market size right now.
That title definitely goes to North America. It was the largest regional market by quite a margin in 2021, pulled in over $104 billion in revenue.
Okay, over 100 billion.
And that's projected to reach over 170 billion by 2033. Still growing at a healthy clip, a TGR of just over 4.2%.
And I'm guessing the United States is the big kahuna in that landscape.
You would be absolutely right. Yeah, the U.S. accounts for the lion's share, hit over $72 billion in 2021 alone.
72 billion.
Projected to reach over 113 billion by 2033. Canada is also significant, market of nearly 24 billion in 2021 and showed pretty strong growth too, a CAGR of about 4.7%.
Okay, and what about Mexico? Because that's often a bit of a different consumer landscape down there.
Right. Mexico, well, it's the smallest of the three in North America by current value, yes. But interestingly, it's showing the highest regional CGR, almost 6%.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, growing from just over 8 billion in 2021 to projected over 16 billion by 2033. Its growth is particularly interesting as you see cultural shifts and, like we saw elsewhere, increasing convenience food options becoming more prevalent.
Okay, fascinating. Let's move across the Atlantic then. How's Europe fitting into this picture? It often feels like maybe a more established, perhaps a more mature market for processed meats, maybe different drivers.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It is indeed a mature market, but it's far from stagnant, still growing consistently. Europe's market size was about 75.7 billion in 2021.
Okay.
And it's projected to grow to almost 127 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of 4.4%.
Still pretty solid growth for a mature market. What's driving that then?
Well, we're seeing different trends, perhaps emphasizing things like premiumization, higher quality ingredients, more artisanal products. Also, demand for healthier options, maybe lower sodium or sustainably sourced meats, even within the processed category.
Right, adapting to consumer demands.
Exactly. And just the continued integration of convenience foods into daily life. That baseline demand is still strong.
So which European countries are leading the pack? In terms of growth rate, I mean.
Looking at the CAGRs, the United Kingdom is actually leading European growth, about 5.4%, expanding from just over 15 billion in 2021 to potentially over 28 billion by 2033.
Okay, UK strong.
Germany is also strong, CAGR about 5%, going from nearly 12.5 billion in 2021 to over 22 billion by 2033. France recorded about 9.5 billion in 2021 with a CAGR on 4.7%. So you see, even these mature markets are finding new pockets of growth, sometimes through innovation in what they're offering.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are there any, just for comparison, any countries showing maybe slower but still positive growth in Europe?
Oh, certainly. If you look at countries like Italy, its CAGR is about 2.9%. Spain is similar, nearly 3%. Luxembourg's smaller market, 2.78%. These indicate more moderate, but still upward trends. It just underscores the very dynamics you can find even within a single continent.
Right, it's not monolithic at all. Okay, how about South America? Is it following similar patterns to some of these other regions, or does it have its own distinct drivers?
South America shows pretty steady expansion. Its market value was about 15.4 billion in 2021.
Okay.
Forecasted to reach nearly 28 billion by 2033.
Right.
That's a CAGR of about 4.95%, so quite respectable.
And Brazil, I assume, is the big player there.
That's expected, yeah. Brazil is the largest market, just over 7.1 billion in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Reflects its large population and, established food culture, which includes processed meats.
But within South America, looking at the numbers again, what's really fascinating here is the growth in Colombia, isn't it?
Absolutely. That one jumps out. Colombia boasts a remarkably high growth rate within the region, a 6.41% CAGR.
Over 6%.
Yeah, growing from around 1.37 billion in 2021 to nearly 3 billion by 2033. It really highlights a country that seems to be rapidly integrating these processed convenience foods into its diet, likely driven by, again, changing lifestyles, maybe increased urbanization, better accessibility.
Very interesting dynamic there. Okay, let's shift focus again. How about the Middle East? A region we often hear about with rapid development, changing consumer habits. What's the processed meat market looking like there?
Well, the Middle East market was about 10.6 billion in 2021. Projected to nearly double, actually, to almost 20 billion by 2033. That's a strong CGR of about 5.35%.
Doubling again. What's fueling that, do you think?
It seems to be often fueled by rising incomes in many parts of the region, significant expatriate populations who bring their own food habits.
Right.
And just a general demand for global food trends, which often include processed meats.
Makes sense. Any specific countries standing out?
Saudi Arabia is showing particularly robust growth, a CAGR of 6%, going from over $4 billion in 2021 to projected more than $8 billion by 2033.
Okay.
The UAE is also strong, 5.43% CAGR, growing from about $1.76 billion in 2021 to over $3.3 billion by 2033. So definitely significant potential being realized there.
Okay, and finally, let's touch on Africa, often talked about as, a continent of immense emerging market potential across many sectors. What are the trends we're seeing specifically for processed meat there?
Africa's market recorded about $7.4 billion in 2021, growing to nearly $13 billion by 2033. That gives it a KGR of just over 4.2%.
So smaller in absolute terms compared to, say, North America or APAC, but still growing.
Exactly. Still important growth.
Yeah.
Nigeria, for instance, generated over $2 billion in 2021 with a KGR of about 4.7%. South Africa posted around $2.8 billion in 2021. The growth here really reflects that increasing urbanization we see in many parts of the continent, a burgeoning consumer base, even though infrastructure development might still be a challenge in some areas.
Okay. So, wow. We've covered a lot of numbers there, a lot of regions, a lot of different growth rates. If we try to connect the dots now, what does all this mean when we step back and look at the bigger picture?
Well, if we kind of zoom out, these numbers, they really paint a compelling picture. It's about shifting global consumption patterns, isn't it? And dynamic economic development.
Right.
So while North America, it remains the traditional powerhouse, currently the largest market by value. Asia-Pacific is undeniably driving the most rapid expansion in terms of growth rate.
That seems clear.
And we're witnessing this fascinating diversity in growth. You have these very high KGRs in countries like India, China, Colombia, that signals really profound dietary and lifestyle changes happening.
Yeah.
Then you have the more moderate but still substantial growth in mature markets like parts of Europe where maybe innovation and premiumization are playing a bigger role. So these figures, they clearly show a market that's vibrant, it's adaptable, and it's far from saturated, it's continuously evolving.
And that really brings us towards the end of this deep dive. The sheer scale, it's worth repeating, I think. The global processed meat market, moving from over $265 billion in 2021 towards potentially an astounding $462 billion by 2033. It's truly remarkable.
It is.
And we've seen how these varying rates of growth across continents, with Asia-Pacific and specific countries like India showing exceptional potential, are really driving much of that forward momentum, often fueled, as you said, by urbanization, changing consumer preferences.
And this naturally raises an important question, doesn't it? You look at this significant continued growth in the processed meat market worldwide. How might these trends influence things down the line, like food production systems, agricultural practices, maybe even public health dialogues in the coming decades?
Right.
And ultimately, how might that shape your daily choices, maybe the food landscape that you see around you? Something to ponder. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into the processed meat market. It's actually a sector that's, well, way more dynamic and surprising than you might first think. Our mission, really, is to help you make sense of the data, the trends behind this whole global food industry. Think of it as a shortcut, helping you understand what's really driving it, what's holding it back, and how it's reshaping itself. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar business.
Absolutely. And the sources we've looked at, they give a really full picture. We're talking everything from, changing consumer habits and health worries right through to complex regulations and pretty fierce competition. So yeah, this deep dive should really help you pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights, give you that strategic edge.
Okay, let's jump in. What's pushing this market forward? The biggest force, well, it seems to be this intense demand for convenience, for ready-to-eat meat products. It's like modern consumers, they absolutely want things easy, but, and this is crucial, they won't sacrifice taste or quality.
Right. And that demand, it's really being fueled by, well, several big trends. Urbanization is one, rising incomes definitely, and just how people eat is changing, especially in developing economies. So processed meats become the easy answer for millions. They're fast, sure, but also consistent. You get variety. It just fits that need for quick meals that still feel, substantial.
Exactly. And you see brands responding. Take Prezuma in India, all right, a big name in chilled meats. Back in 2022, they jumped into frozen stuffed chicken nuggets, bacon, even shami kebabs, which are these really tasty Indian patties. It just shows how the sector's adapting, reacting to what people want, including local tastes.
Yeah, that's a great example. And then stepping back a bit, there's a second major driver. It's this growing focus on protein, on nutrient-dense processed meats. It's not just about less bad for you anymore. People are actively looking for better options, like fortified meats. Consumers are more health conscious, thinking about fitness. So the demand for high protein, maybe lower fat options, it just keeps going up. And what's really interesting is the tech side. Innovations are letting manufacturers actually boost the nutrition, add vitamins, minerals. This fits right in with those high protein diet trends. So you get these health focused buyers who still want the convenience and the flavor. It's creating this new space, really, where wellness and indulgence kind of meet, which you wouldn't have thought possible before.
Okay, but it's not all growth, is it? There are definitely headwinds. A big one is, well, people are just more aware now of the health risks. You see it in the media. There's more research linking processed meat to things like heart disease, cancer, obesity, serious stuff. And that's causing a shift, right? People are looking more towards plant-based options or just, less processed alternatives.
That's a really crucial point. And the consequences, these traditional meat companies, they're under pressure. They have to think about reformulating, maybe being more transparent about what's in their products, or even diversifying, branching out into healthier lines just to keep their customers. The big question is, how fast can these giants, these really established players, actually pivot without messing up their current business?
Yeah, that's tricky. And speaking of tricky, I was really thrilled by the policy stuff, specifically those 2025 Trump-era tariffs. Wow, they've added some real volatility, haven't they? We're talking a 25% tariff on beef coming in from Canada and Mexico, and these aren't minor suppliers. They provide a lot of the lean beef that goes into things like hamburgers.
Yeah.
So a 25% tariff, that's a direct hit to the wallets of U.S. meat processors. For every pound they import, it just jacks up their costs immediately.
And you have to connect that to the bigger picture. Like domestically in the U.S., cattle numbers are way down, historically low, actually, because of drought, because feed costs are up. So the U.S. market is already struggling to produce enough beef internally.
Right.
So the impact on consumers, it's pretty clear. Higher prices at the supermarket,
Yeah.
and maybe even shortages.
And here's where it gets kind of wild. The tariffs were meant to help U.S. ranchers protect them, right? But what actually happened, it triggered this massive, record surge of beef coming in from Australia.
Yeah, it's surprising.
Helped along by good exchange rates for them and competitive prices.
Yeah.
It's completely counterintuitive, isn't it?
It really is, and it just highlights those ripple effects you mentioned. I mean, U.S. restaurants, food service providers, they are seriously worried. The National Restaurant Association put out a number. They think these tariffs could cost the industry something like over $12 billion. Yeah, driving up menu prices even more, squeezing margins all the way down the food chain. It's just this complex tangle of unintended consequences, A policy aimed here creates problems way over there.
It really is complex. Okay, so these policies, even with specific aims, can just send shockwaves everywhere.
Yeah.
Let's pivot now to who's who in the market. The competitive landscape. I mean, obviously, it's dominated by the huge global players, right? Tyson Foods, JBS, Hormel, Smithfield, the usual suspects. And they stay on top through, the usual mix. Constant innovation, buying up smaller companies, and just massive distribution networks.
But what's really fascinating now is how they're adapting, fundamentally adapting. They're putting more effort into plant-based lines, cleaner labels, trying to stay relevant as people's preferences shift. It really shows you how things like health concerns, environmental worries, sustainability, they're totally changing the definition of success in this industry. It's not just about selling the most volume anymore.
Totally agree. Things like transparency, cleaner ingredients, eco-friendly packaging. Where the meat comes from, that stuff is becoming just as important for keeping customers loyal as, how it tastes or how easy it is to cook. It's a completely different ballgame for these big companies.
Yeah.
And, despite these giants, it's interesting that the market is still pretty fragmented. You've got regional players, local brands, and they hold significant ground too, especially in certain niches or in emerging economies, often by focusing on exactly those things, transparency, local sourcing, etc.
Right, they find their space.
So wrapping this up, what does all this mean for you, the listener, trying to understand this space?
Well, I think this deep dive really shows the processed meat market is just evolving incredibly fast. It's caught between these powerful forces, convenience, cost, health worries, global trade issues. It's just a really dynamic, complex area where the old guard is being forced to innovate like crazy. Yeah, absolutely. And as you continue to think strategically, try to stay ahead of the curve, here's maybe something to consider. This rapid rise of plant-based proteins, it's not just about a substitute for meat. It might be showing us totally new ways to think about food production, how companies connect with consumers. So how might these alternatives completely reshape not just our dinner plates, but maybe the entire infrastructure of farming and food processing globally in the next, say, 10 years? That's definitely something worth mulling over.